Today, friends, we are testing out the cheapest crimpers you can get on Amazon. They cost me about $22 and say they can handle up to 1/0 wire. We're going to put it to the test. We're going to use a little hacksaw to cut them open and compare them to my other two favorite types of crimping, which is a hydraulic crimper and then a good old trusty hammer crimp. How will this $22 set compare to, say, an $80 hydraulic crimper or a $20 hammer crimp? The only way we're going to find out is get to crimping, cut them open, and see what they look like on the inside.
Yeah, I just want to be the greatest.
Alright, I've got my 4-gauge stripped, ready to crimp here. I've got the dies set to 25 as per the written instructions here. So let's see what kind of crimp we get on this. Now, as far as using this, I will say that it is not super great. So I just don't have a lot of confidence in the crimps on this. Let's do it a few more times and let's try to give it the best chance it can have to have a decent crimp. I certainly wouldn't consider that a pretty crimp. I don't even think it's an acceptable crimp, but we shall see once we cut it open. I mean, it is holding, so I guess there's that, but yeah, this just does not seem like it's going to do the trick. All right, the lug is secured on there. Now we're just going to crimp it up and see how it actually does. I'll extend these all the way, insert the lug. You can already tell I don't really care for these compared to a hydraulic crimper because they're a little bit more cumbersome to use. I believe I got it locked in. Let me just... So it didn't take that much force to do that. Now let's see what kind of crimp we have here. That's not great. We're going to go again down here. See if we can get it a little bit better. Now it doesn't take force to do it, but also I don't think it's getting a very good crimp on it either. Well, I've hit it in a few spots, and I gotta say I don't have a lot of confidence in that crimp. It does not seem like it's pulling out easy, but it just, I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence in it at all, even after doing it 3 times. We'll have to cut it open and see what it looks like. I could also try it with the 35 die, which sometimes you have to do with even a hydraulic crimper to get the correct amount of crimp. Alright, on this side, we're going to do a hydraulic crimp with my old trusty hydraulic crimper here. I do have the 50mm die in here, although these have been ground down a little bit to kind of get the perfect crimp for me. So we'll see how much better this is than the hand set, which is over here. I can tell you it's much easier to use because I can set it on a table like this, tighten up the hydraulic line, then I can simply just start pumping it. Now in vehicle, this is going to be much more of a problem, but if you're doing your crimps outside the vehicle, this is 100% my most recommended way to do it. Alright, we're starting to get some pressure on it. Not hard at all. Just kind of go until it yields or stops. Give it one more for good luck. With the pressure off. Now you can see here, much more unified crimp. I have much more faith in this crimp than I do this one. That's for sure. Although, I mean, you can't judge a book by its cover. Once we cut this open, it may look good in here. We don't know until we actually know. But looks wise, definitely this one wins so far. So when we strip this side, we'll do a hammer crimped lug on this side and see how it compares to the rest of them. Alright, so I've got the next method lined up. We're using a hammer crimp, which is also a very affordable method. And in my opinion, I think it's going to be a lot better crimp than this cheap Amazon hand crimp. But That being said, let's give it a couple whacks, and then we can put them in the vise here and cut them all open and see what they look like. With the hammer crimp, you get a angular type of crimp. It's not the prettiest crimp, but it's also not the worst. And I think it looks okay once you throw the heat shrink on it. It's a simple device to use. It's cost effective, but how does it look when we cut it open compared to this monstrosity? Let's find that out right now. I'm going to start by cutting the hydraulic crimp, and then we will do the hammer crimp next using a hacksaw. Now, the last time I cut these open, I did have someone mention that they thought doing it with a grinder was helping the connection here. They suggested to use a hacksaw, so that's what I'm gonna do, although it is a mighty pain to do it. That being said, I'm gonna show you the footage of cutting this one open, and I'll just cut the rest open. You don't actually need to see me cut them open, I don't think. You'll just have to trust that I did cut them open with a hacksaw. So with all that being said, there's nothing left to do but to cut them open and compare. Before we got into the big guys, the 1/0 crimps, I did want to start with the 4 gauge just to see how it did. Now, I did lose the footage of me actually sawing it, but I did, and this is what happened. So as you can see, I got the hacksaw pretty much all the way through it, and notice that I really wasn't cutting anything after I got past the metal, because literally all of the metal fell out. So there was nothing in here. It literally did not crimp anything. So checking out this piece of wire here, you can kind of see where I cut it through with the hacksaw. And if I zoom in right here, you can see all the 4 gauge wire that fell out. So far, the Yangao is not doing so well. We'll get into these 1/0 crimps and see what they do. Maybe we'll start off with known good crimps like the hydraulic crimp here, or the hammer crimp here, and then we'll compare them to what this one did. We are back with the results, and I have got them pretty much cut all the way through. I left a little bit on there just so we can explore both sides of the crimp and kind of check them out. I think we'll start with the crimps that I've already tested before, the hydraulic crimp and the hammer crimp, and we'll kind of look at those and compare a little bit. So let's start with the hydraulic crimp. Starting off with the hydraulic crimp, you can see it actually did leave a small bit of stranded wire on the back. That's going to be normal. You know, not every crimp by hand is going to be 100% perfect unless you're using a hydraulic mechanism and you know that you're putting the same amount of pressure every time. You might get a little something like this. That being said, it is pretty much solid all the way through, really tight grain structure. And that's what you want to see. It's basically one piece of copper minus the little bit of strands on back, and you're going to see that on every one of these crimps. You can see how much is left here. It's just barely anything hanging on. I just wanted to be able to show you guys both sides. But this looks really good. It's what we expect out of a hydraulic crimp. Let's check out the hammer crimp and see how it compares to this one. So with the hammer crimp, we get a bigger spot right here on the left of stranded wire. Now that's not terrible, but it's also not great compared to the regular hydraulic. But you can see the crimp part is a nice solid grain. It looks really consistent, really smooth, minus this one little stranded part. And as you can see, it's right there on the edge where the triangle part of the crimp ends. This side, however, did pretty well. Now we're going to check out the crimps that we got with the cheapest crimper on Amazon. And you can already see we've got some trouble here. It looks like it did smash it down, and cutting it with the hacksaw kind of smoothed it out. But you can see the voids in here. This did not compress at all. It did a little bit better on the bottom side. I will give it that. On the bottom side, it did okay, but you can look at the grain of that and tell that it's not as compressed as the other two methods. This was using the 50mm die. I did do one more with the 35mm just to give it a better shot, so we'll take a look at that next. But what I do want to point out is I'm cutting directly in the middle of these crimps wherever they landed. That way we get the best shot. So one side we did okay, the other side we did pretty horribly. Now on to the crimp with the 35mm die. And you can see here it did a much better job. You have much more compression up top here. You have a much smoother, more solid grain structure. It did leave us more stranded wire in the back than the hammer crimp or the regular hydraulic crimp method though. So here's my final take on this. I've got these going from left to right in my preferred method. Obviously, if you've been watching the channel, you know I'm going to tell you that I prefer a hydraulic crimp. That's my number one choice. I like it the best. I think the hydraulic crimper is the most consistent overall, and it's going to give you the best results time after time when you're using it. You can currently pick up a hydraulic set like this for around $75 to $150. Well worth the investment in my opinion if you're going to be doing a lot of crimps. That being said, if you need a more budget friendly option, I'm going to point you to this guy right here. This is a Timco hammer crimp. It can be purchased for $22. You can find versions of this for as little as $15. For the budget option, I think that the hammer crimp is 100% the way to go. It's a little bit more work. You're going to have to use a big ball peen hammer to get decent results, but you can get good results with a hammer crimp. It's fairly consistent. It's inexpensive, although a bit inefficient, but it will do the trick. Now, for number 3, the cheapest crimpers on Amazon, I believe at time of purchase, I paid $21 for these. I will put an updated price on the screen so you can see what these are currently going for. Can I recommend these? I'm going to say that no, I really can't recommend these. I have several issues with them. Let's go with one of the obvious things that maybe you can see. The handles have already turned on me. Just one use. They're barely on there, and yeah, I really don't care for that. The other thing is, this is what stops the crimp right here, and this seems like after a bit of tweaking and moving that you're probably going to end up having an issue right here on this joint. I also don't like the dies. I do like the die selection. I do like that you can open it up and easily select where you want to go with it. So that is a nice feature. Adding to things that I don't really care for is the size of the dies. They are very, very thin. You're going to have to crimp several times to get a decent crimp, as we've seen. And I don't think it's a very good crimp overall. If you're using a chisel or a punch to crimp lugs right now, I'm going to steer you towards this hammer crimp. It's going to save you a lot of time over doing that, and it's, you know, $20 or less. So back to the Yan Gal crimpers, I would say steer clear of these. Don't even consider buying these. Don't waste your money on those. Pick up a hammer crimp, or if you got a little extra, get the hydraulic crimp. It'll be well worth your money, and I think you will be happy with that purchase. So with that being said, I appreciate each and every one of you who watch these videos. If you like this kind of stuff, hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. And with all that being said, I will catch you on the very next video. I'd like to thank all my Patreon supporters, but the $6 or more members get a special shout out, and that is 2001 Monolithic, Gene Nava, Joaquin Juarez, El Fuego Audio, Travis McClendon, Brandon Hanna, William Berg, Boxboy Audio Sound Solutions, Jesus Tires, Dennis Cromwell Jr., Scott Dilbeck, D. Stewart, David Kozlik, Scott McCord, Matthew Tolberg, Cornut, Trucker 9000, Bobby Burkett, Kevin Lautner, James Childers, Baba, Thomas Marshall, Living Loud with Andy, Neil Nato, Chris Cogburn, Lars Madsen, and Old School Stereo. For as little as $2 a month, you can join the Patreon team and get exclusive Patreon-only content, including a monthly Patreon-only hangout stream. It's a really good time. You guys are missing out, and if you want to join, check me out at patreon.com/HifiVega.